Please friends spot my channel, subscribe for more stories. She arrived as a frozen, abandoned bride, but the truth she was hiding could start a war in the Wild West. The girl at the station. The wind howled like a wounded animal across the empty plains of Silver Creek. Snow fell in thick, relentless sheets, covering the ground, the tracks, and every trace of warmth the town had ever known. Ethan Cole pulled his coat tighter around his chest as he stepped off his horse. The train had already come and gone. Late again. Or maybe, he was just too early for something that didn't matter. Silver Creek Station was nearly deserted. Just an old wooden bench, a flickering lantern, and a station sign barely visible beneath the snow. But then he saw her. A girl. Sitting still. Too still. She was wrapped in a dark cloak, her hands pale and trembling around a small, worn suitcase. Snow had gathered on her shoulders, in her hair, even along her eyelashes. She hadn't moved, not even when he approached. Ethan frowned. "Ma'am." No response. He stepped closer, boots crunching in the ice. "Miss." Her head slowly turned, and what he saw made him pause. Her lips were cracked from cold. Her face pale, almost ghost-like. But her eyes weren't weak. They were steady, strong, and filled with something he couldn't quite place. "I'm waiting," she said softly. "For who?" "My husband." Ethan looked around the empty station again. There was no one. No wagons. No men. No signs of anyone coming. "What's his name?" Ethan asked. She hesitated. "Thomas Reed." Ethan knew that name. Everyone did. Thomas Reed had died 3 months ago. A mining accident. Buried under a collapsed shaft. Ethan exhaled slowly. "You didn't hear," he said gently. Her grip tightened on the suitcase. "No. He wrote to me. He said he'd be here." Ethan shook his head. "I'm sorry." Silence fell between them. The kind of silence that breaks something inside a person. The girl didn't cry. Didn't scream. She just stared at the snow. As if the truth hadn't fully reached her yet. Then she whispered, almost to herself. "I have nowhere else to go." Ethan looked at her again. Really looked this time. She wasn't just cold. She was alone. And in a place like this, alone meant dead. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Well," he said finally, "you can't stay here." She looked up. "I've got a ranch," he continued. "Ain't much. But it's warm. You can stay till you figure things out." She studied him carefully. Most men in the West had something dangerous in their eyes. Greed, violence, desperation. But this man, he just looked tired. "Why would you help me?" she asked. Ethan gave a small shrug. "Because someone ought to." The wind howled louder, as if pushing her toward a decision. After a long moment, she nodded. "My name is Eliza." Ethan tipped his hat slightly. Ethan. And just like that, 2 strangers began a journey that neither of them would ever forget. A place called home. The journey to Ethan's ranch was long and quiet. Snow covered everything in sight, turning the world into a cold, endless white. The only sound was the steady crunch of hooves against frozen and the occasional whistle of the wind slipping through the hills. Eliza sat behind Ethan on the horse, her hands gripping the back of his coat, not out of comfort but necessity. She was still shivering, still silent, still processing everything she had just lost. Ethan could feel it. Grief had a weight to it, and right now, she carried more than most people ever could. "You all right back there?" he asked without turning. "I will be," she replied quietly. But her voice didn't sound convinced. After nearly an hour, a faint outline appeared through the storm. A ranch. Small, weathered, barely holding together. But, standing. Ethan slowed the horse. That's it. Eliza leaned slightly to see. It wasn't what she expected. No large home. No welcoming lights. No sign of comfort. Just a lonely cabin, a broken fence, and a barn that had seen better days. You live here? She asked. Yeah, Ethan said simply. He didn't sound ashamed, but he didn't sound proud either. Inside, the cabin was warmer than it looked. A fire crackled weakly in the fireplace. A wooden table stood in the center, surrounded by two mismatched chairs. A bed rested in the corner, covered in thick blankets. It wasn't much, but it was shelter. Ethan took off his coat and handed it to her. Sit by the fire. Eliza hesitated, then slowly stepped forward and lowered herself beside the flames. The warmth hit her like a wave. Her hand stretched toward it, trembling as feeling slowly returned to her fingers. For the first time since the station, she closed her eyes. Ethan watched quietly. He'd seen people like this before. Not broken, not weak, just lost. He moved toward a small shelf, grabbing a tin cup and pouring water into it. Then he placed it near the fire to warm. You can stay here, he said after a moment. Her eyes opened. For how long? She asked. Ethan shrugged. Till you figure out your next step. And if I don't have one? He paused. That was a harder question. Then you stay till you do. That night was quiet. Too quiet. Ethan took the chair. Eliza took the bed. But sleep didn't come easily to either of them. Hours passed. The fire dimmed. The wind outside howled louder. And somewhere in the middle of the night, Eliza, her eyes opened instantly. Yes, you said you came from far, Ethan said, his voice low in the dark. Where from? She hesitated. Boston. That caught his attention. Boston, he repeated. That's a long way from here. I know. Silence followed. Then he asked the question that had been sitting in his mind since the station. Why him? Eliza didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than before. Because he promised me a new life. Ethan leaned back slightly. And you believed him. I needed to. That answer said more than anything else could. Morning came slowly. The storm had passed, leaving behind a thick, blinding layer of snow. Ethan was already outside, fixing part of the fence that had collapsed during the night. Eliza stepped out carefully, wrapping the coat tightly around herself. The cold hit her again, but this time, she didn't look as fragile. She walked toward him. You work alone? She asked. Ethan nodded. Always have. No family. He kept hammering a loose plank into place. Had one, he said. The way he said it made her stop asking. Some wounds didn't need to be opened. As the day went on, Eliza began to notice things. The ranch wasn't just worn down. It was struggling. The barn had barely any livestock. The supplies were low. Even the tools looked old and overused. You're barely getting by, she said later that afternoon. Ethan wiped sweat from his brow, despite the cold. Yeah, he admitted. Why stay? He looked out across the land. Because it's mine. Simple, but heavy. That evening, Eliza did something unexpected. She rolled up her sleeves and started helping. She cleaned the cabin, organized what little supplies he had, even managed to cook something resembling a proper meal from the scraps available. Ethan watched her quietly. You don't have to do that, he said. I know, she replied. Then why? She glanced at him, and for the first time, there was a faint spark in her eyes. Because I'm not as helpless as I look. Ethan almost smiled. Days passed. Then a week. Something began to change. The cabin felt less empty. The silence wasn't as heavy. And Ethan found himself noticing things he hadn't before, like the way Eliza hummed softly while working, or how she stood a little straighter each day, or how her sadness slowly turned into something stronger. But there was something else too. Something she wasn't saying. Sometimes, late at night, Ethan would see her sitting by the fire, holding that same suitcase, staring at it, like it held more than just clothes, like it held secrets. And one night, curiosity finally got the better of him. "What's in the case?" he asked. Eliza froze. Her fingers tightened around the handle. For a moment, she didn't breathe. Then she slowly looked up at him. Her eyes no longer soft, no longer fragile, but sharp, careful, dangerous. "Things that could change everything," she said. Ethan frowned. "That's supposed to mean something." She stood up, holding the suitcase close. "It means," she said quietly, "I'm not who you think I am." The fire cracked loudly between them. Ethan didn't move, didn't speak, because deep down, he had already started to realize that. And whatever truth she was hiding, it was coming, soon. The secret she carried. The fire burned low, casting long shadows across the cabin walls. Ethan didn't move, neither did Eliza. The air between them had changed, thicker now, heavier, like something unseen had stepped into the room with them. "You're not who I think you are," Ethan finally said, his voice calm but firm. "Then who are you?" Eliza's grip tightened around the suitcase. For a moment, it looked like she might walk away. Like she might keep running. From him, from the truth, from whatever was chasing her. But instead, she slowly knelt beside the bed, and opened it. The hinges creaked softly, breaking the silence. Ethan stepped closer. Inside, there were no clothes. No personal belongings. No simple traveler's items. Instead, there were documents. Stacks of them, neatly wrapped in cloth. And beneath them, a small revolver. Ethan's eyes narrowed. "That ain't something a lost bride carries," he said quietly. "No," Eliza replied, "it isn't." She pulled out a folded paper and held it for a second, as if debating whether to let him see it. Then she handed it over. Ethan unfolded it carefully. His expression changed instantly. "What is this?" he asked. "A land deed," she said. Ethan looked closer. The document wasn't just any deed. It carried an official seal. A powerful one, and the name written across the bottom made his stomach tighten. "Whitmore." He looked up sharply. "That name," he said. "You said your name was Eliza." She met his gaze. "It is. That paper says Whitmore." Silence. Then she spoke. "My full name is Eliza Whitmore." Ethan felt something shift in his chest. Whitmore wasn't just a name. It was power. Railroads. Land. Money. Influence stretching across states. "You're telling me," he said slowly, "you come from one of the richest families in the East, and you ended up freezing at a station in Silver Creek." Eliza let out a quiet breath. "I ran away." The confession hung in the air like a storm about to break. "Why?" Ethan asked. She stood slowly, wrapping her arms around herself. "Because my life wasn't mine," she said. "Every decision, every move, every breath, it was all controlled." Her voice grew steadier. "My father arranged my marriage. Not for love, not for happiness, for business." Ethan frowned. "Thomas Reed." She nodded. "He needed funding. My father needed access to land out west. I was the deal." Ethan clenched his jaw. "So you ran." "Yes. And came all this way," just to find him dead. Eliza looked away. Yes. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of it all settled deep. Then Ethan glanced back at the suitcase. All this paperwork, he said. What's it for? Eliza hesitated. Then she told him the truth. Because the land he owned, she said slowly, is worth more than anyone here realizes. Ethan's eyes sharpened. How much more? Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. Enough to start wars. Outside, a faint sound broke the silence. Hoofbeats. Distant, but growing louder. Ethan turned his head toward the door instantly. His instincts kicking in. You expecting someone? He asked. Eliza's face went pale. No. The hoofbeats got closer. Fast. Too fast. Ethan moved to the window, pulling the curtain aside just enough to see. 3 riders. Maybe 4. Armed. And heading straight for the ranch. His expression hardened. Looks like trouble found you anyway. Eliza stepped back, fear flashing across her face. They found me, she whispered. Ethan turned to her. Who? Her voice trembled, but she forced the words out. My father's men. The horses came to a stop outside. Boots hit the snow. Heavy. Confident. Dangerous. A loud knock slammed against the cabin door. Miss Whitmore. A man's voice called out. We know you're inside. Ethan's hand moved instinctively toward his belt. Stay behind me, he muttered. Eliza shook her head quickly. No. You don't understand. They won't leave without me. Another knock. Harder this time. You've caused enough trouble, Miss Whitmore, the voice continued. It's time to come home. Home. The word sounded wrong, like a cage disguised as comfort. Ethan glanced at her. You wanna go with them? He asked. Her answer came instantly. No. That was all he needed. The door burst open. Snow blew inside as 3 men stepped in, guns at their sides, eyes sharp and calculating. The one in front removed his hat slowly. Well, he said, looking at Eliza, there you are. Then his gaze shifted to Ethan. And who might you be? Ethan didn't flinch. Just a man standing in your way. The man smirked. That won't end well for you. Ethan's voice dropped. Depends on how bad you want her. The tension snapped tight, like a rope ready to break. Eliza stepped forward suddenly. Stop, she said. Both sides froze. She looked at the men. I'm not going back. The leader sighed, almost disappointed. You don't have a choice. Ethan stepped closer to her side. She just made one. The man's eyes darkened. Then, his hand twitched toward his gun. And in that exact moment, everything changed. The man he used to be. The moment the man's hand twitched toward his gun, Ethan moved faster. A sharp crack split the air as his revolver fired first. The bullet struck the man's hand, sending his weapon flying across the cabin floor. He staggered back with a shout, clutching his wrist. Everything exploded into chaos. The other men reached for their guns. But Ethan was already in motion. He grabbed the edge of the table and flipped it over, creating cover as another shot blasted through the cabin wall, splintering wood into the air. Eliza, down, he barked. She dropped instantly, heart pounding, as bullets tore through the space above her. Ethan fired again, precise, controlled. Not wild, not desperate, calculated. One of the men fell back against the doorframe, groaning. The third hesitated. That hesitation cost him. Ethan stepped forward, gun steady, eyes cold. Don't, he warned. The man froze. Slowly, he raised his hands. Silence followed, heavy, broken only by the sound of the wind creeping through the open door and the faint groans of the injured. Eliza looked up from the floor, her breath shaking. She stared at Ethan, not the tired rancher she had come to know, but something else, something far more dangerous. "You've done this before," she said. Ethan didn't answer right away. He kept his gun trained on the men, watching, waiting. Then finally, "Yeah," he said quietly. "I have." The leader of the group, still clutching his wounded hand, glared at him through gritted teeth. "You just made a big mistake," he hissed. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." Ethan stepped closer, his boots slow, heavy, unafraid. "I got a pretty good idea," he said. The man smirked despite the pain. "Then you know her father won't stop." Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. "I figured as much. You think you can protect her?" The man continued. "Out here, alone." Ethan didn't respond, because part of that was true. 3 men were nothing compared to what could come next. Money like the Whitmores had. It didn't just buy land. It bought armies. "Ethan." Eliza's voice was softer now. Uncertain. He glanced back at her. "You don't have to do this," she said. "This isn't your fight." Ethan looked at her for a long moment. Then he holstered his gun slowly. "It became my fight the moment they walked through that door," he said. Her chest tightened. No one had ever chosen her over power before. No one had stood between her and her past, without expecting something in return. But Ethan, he just stood there, like it was the simplest thing in the world. He turned back to the men. "You're leaving," he said firmly. The leader laughed bitterly. "You think this ends here?" Ethan stepped closer, his voice dropping low. "It ends with you walking out that door, or being carried out. Your choice." The man stared at him, trying to read him, trying to find doubt, but there was none, only certainty. After a long, tense moment, "Fine," he muttered. He gestured to the others. "Move." They slowly backed toward the door, dragging the injured with them. But before stepping outside, the leader paused and looked at Eliza one last time. "You can run as far as you want," he said. "But your father always gets what belongs to him." The words hit like a storm. Then they were gone. The cabin fell silent again. But this time, it wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of silence that comes after something breaks. Ethan exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. "They'll be back," he said. Eliza nodded. "I know." She stood up, her legs still unsteady. "You should let me go," she said. Ethan turned to her sharply. "No. This will only get worse," she insisted. "For you. For this place." "It already got worse," he replied. "And I'm still here." She shook her head. "You don't understand what my father is capable of." Ethan's expression hardened. "Then maybe it's time I do." She stared at him, then asked the question that had been building inside her since the gunfight began. "Who are you, really?" Ethan went quiet. For a long moment, it seemed like he wouldn't answer. Then he walked over to the window, staring out at the endless white land beyond. "I used to wear a badge," he said. Eliza blinked. "A lawman," he nodded faintly. "Years ago. Different town. Different life." "What happened?" His jaw tightened. "I failed." The words were simple, but heavy. "There was a gang," he continued. "Robbers. Killers. I tracked them for months." His voice grew quieter. "I got too close." Eliza listened carefully. "What do you mean?" Ethan's eyes darkened. "They came for me, but I wasn't the one they found." Her breath caught. "Your family." He nodded once. Silence filled the room again. "I buried them myself," he said. "Then I buried the man I used to be right alongside them." Eliza felt something shift inside her. Pain recognized pain. Loss understood loss. That's why you're here, she said softly. Yeah, and that's why you helped me. Ethan didn't answer. But he didn't need to. The fire crackled between them. Outside, the sky had begun to darken again. Another storm coming. Or maybe something worse. Eliza stepped closer. They'll bring more men next time, she said. Not just 3. Ethan nodded. I know. And if they do, she hesitated, then said it anyway. We won't survive. Ethan looked at her. Really looked at her. Then a faint, almost unnoticeable smile crossed his face. Maybe not, he said. But I didn't survive all this time just to start running now. For the first time since she arrived, Eliza didn't feel alone. But she did feel something else. Something stronger. Something dangerous. Hope. Far beyond the hills, a larger group of riders moved through the snow. More organized. More armed. And leading them, a man who didn't forgive. Didn't forget. And never lost. Eliza's father. The storm that changed everything. The storm arrived before dawn. Not just snow. Not just wind. But something heavier. Something final. Ethan was already awake when the first distant rumble of hooves echoed across the frozen land. He stood by the window, eyes narrowed. They're here, he said quietly. Eliza's breath caught as she rose from the bed. This wasn't 3 men. This was something else entirely. She stepped beside him and looked out. Dozens. Riders cutting through the snow like shadows, their dark coats blending into the storm. At the front, a tall figure sat unmoving on his horse. Even from a distance, there was no mistaking him. Power didn't need to shout. It just existed. Her voice dropped to a whisper. My father. The riders stopped just outside the ranch. A wall of men. Guns. Control. Ethan grabbed his coat and reached for his rifle. You stay inside, he said. No, Eliza replied instantly. He turned to her. This isn't a place for you. It is, she said firmly. This started with me. It ends with me. Their eyes locked. For a moment, Ethan saw not the frightened girl from the station, but the woman she truly was. Strong, unyielding, unbreakable. He gave a small nod. Then stay close. They stepped outside together. The wind whipped around them, snow dancing violently in the air. Eliza's father slowly dismounted his horse. Every movement calm, controlled. He walked forward, boots sinking into the snow. Elizabeth, he said, her full name, cold, sharp. I wondered how long you'd hide. Eliza straightened. I'm not hiding. His gaze shifted briefly to Ethan. And this is what you chose? He asked. A rancher. A nobody. Ethan didn't react. Didn't flinch. Eliza's voice didn't shake. I chose my life. Her father's expression hardened. No, he said. You don't get to choose. Not when everything you have comes from me. He gestured slightly. One of his men stepped forward, holding a folded paper. A contract, her father continued. You return with me. You marry where I decide. And this little mistake, his eyes flicked toward Ethan again, is forgotten. Silence. The wind roared. Eliza looked at the paper. Then at her father. Then at Ethan. And in that moment, she understood something clearly. More clearly than ever before. I'm not signing that, she said. The air changed instantly. Her father's patience vanished. I wasn't asking, he replied. Men shifted. Hands moved toward guns. Ethan stepped slightly in front of her. That's far enough, he said. Her father studied him now. Really studied him. You're the one who shot my men, he said. Ethan didn't deny it. They were warned. A faint smile touched the older man's lips. Interesting. Then his eyes darkened. But irrelevant. He raised his hand, and the world held its breath. Eliza. Ethan's voice cut through the storm. Now. She didn't hesitate. Didn't look back. Instead, she stepped forward, past Ethan, past the line of safety, and straight toward her father. "Stop," she said. Everything froze. Even the wind seemed to quiet. Her father lowered his hand slightly, confused. "Eliza," Ethan called, tension sharp in his voice. But she kept walking, until she stood just a few feet from the man who had controlled her entire life. Then she did something no one expected. She reached into her coat and pulled out the documents. The land deeds. She held them up. "You want control," she said. "You want power." Her father's eyes locked onto the papers instantly. "That land," she continued, "is in my name now. Legally transferred before I left." A murmur moved through the men. Her father's expression shifted, for the first time, uncertain. "You're lying," he said. Eliza shook her head. "I'm not." She stepped closer. "If anything happens to me, if I disappear, if I don't return by my own will." Her voice sharpened. "Those documents go public." The storm roared again. "But if I stay free," she continued, "the land stays untouched. No wars, no attention, no loss." Now the silence was different. Not tense, but calculating. Her father stared at her. Not as a daughter, but as an equal. Ethan watched from behind, realization hitting him hard. This wasn't just about escape. This was strategy. She hadn't run blindly. She had planned everything. Her father exhaled slowly. "You've grown bold," he said. Eliza didn't respond, didn't back down, didn't blink. Another long moment passed. Then finally, "Very well," he said. The words shocked everyone. "You stay," he continued. "For now." Ethan's grip tightened slightly, not trusting it. "But understand this," her father added, his voice cold again. "This isn't over." Eliza met his gaze. "I know." He turned away, mounted his horse, and with a single gesture, the men followed. Within moments, they were gone, disappearing into the storm like they had never been there at all. Silence returned. Real silence this time. Ethan let out a slow breath, then looked at her. "You planned that," he said. Eliza gave a small, tired smile. "I had to." He stepped closer. "All this time, you weren't just running." "No," she said softly. "I was choosing." Days later, the snow began to melt. The ranch slowly came back to life. The broken fences were repaired. The barn filled again, and for the first time in years, Ethan didn't feel like he was just surviving. He was living. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the horizon, painting the sky in gold, Eliza stood outside, watching the land stretch endlessly before her. Ethan walked up beside her. "You ever regret it?" he asked. She glanced at him. "Leaving everything?" He nodded. She looked back at the horizon, then shook her head. "No." A soft pause. Then she added, "Because I didn't lose everything." Ethan raised an eyebrow slightly. "Oh yeah," she smiled faintly. "I found something better." He didn't ask what she meant, because deep down, he already knew. And in a quiet corner of the Wild West, where a frozen girl once sat alone at a station, a new story had begun. Not one of control, not one of fear, but of choice, of strength, and of two broken lives finding something whole again.